Hello everyone, and welcome to our next webinar, which is on SOC 2 compliance. This came after the last time we had a nice webinar on PCI DSS in 90 days. That was again like as per people asking how to make PCI DSS happen in 90 days. And after we did that, not surprisingly, many of our attendees asked, can there be some approach to even apply um, this approach to even SOC 2, and that's how we came up with this new webinar on SOC 2 compliance in 90 days. Again, I'm not trying to sell you a tool or something by which you can do this in 90 days. It's an approach that I'll be elaborating on, and I really hope that you make good use of it. And if you have any queries, just drop it in, and I'll try and answer you in the course of this of this webinar. And if not, if there are too many queries, which typically there is, then rest assured that I will definitely, most definitely email back the responses to you. Anyway, so here we go with the webinar on SOC 2 compliance in 90 days. So this is what is a brief agenda. Of course, there's too many points, and I don't know how I'll do this in like 45-50 minutes, but I'll try and do as much justice as possible. So stay with me. There is a huge amount of compliance content which is there on a YouTube channel, and you can go through it. And towards the end of the webinar, I will put down our link that you can click off our YouTube channel. You can subscribe, and there are a lot of playlists over there for HIPAA. There is PCI DSS, GDPR, ethical hacking, and of course SOC 2. So if you need to get into various levels on the basics of SOC 2, on SOC 2 and HIPAA, SOC 2 and GDPR, SOC 2 and cybersecurity, so many areas. So visit our YouTube channel, subscribe to the videos, and you can of course go through all the playlists. All the content is free. So as we go to this webinar, remember your questions are what will really make a difference to everything. So do drop in your questions as we go ahead. So this is a brief about me. I've been in this industry for more than 25 years now, and primarily more in InfoSec. And I've got my own company, VISTA InfoSec, and we are primarily into compliance. We don't sell any products. We are there in India. We are there in US, and we are shortly even come up in Singapore. Just last month, we launched in Singapore because there is a huge amount of requirements even coming in from the Southeast Asia. So that's who we are. And okay, moving ahead. These are our service portfolio. We have got different departments for compliance and governance. We do all these 27,001 PCI DSS, cloud risk. We are very strong in regulatory compliance. Of course, the VAPT. We do technical advisory and reviews of niche area products like WAF, SIM, IPS, DAM, WIPS, MDM, NAC, and stuff. And last but not the least, we even have an online training portal. You can visit academiacompliance.com. That's ours. It's not like a tie-up, but it's our online training portal for on-site and remote or online trainings in basically InfoSec. So let's go ahead with the content. So SOC overview, just a brief overview on SOC. So there are three levels. There is SOC 1. I wouldn't say level. There are three different types of reports in SOC. One is SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3. Earlier, SOC 1 and all were known as SSA 16, which got upgraded to SSA 18 or SOC 1, AT 101. And SOC 1 is there, and the SOC 1 is basically more from the ICFR, Internal Control for Financial Reporting, using the COSO framework. So it is basically your financial statement assertions that you are a stable company, that you're able to deliver on what, how effectively you're delivering on your commitments to your client. And SOC 2 is again more from the IT perspective, InfoSec perspective. And I remember one thing, the focus of these reports, it is more client facing. What I mean by that is that if you have a subcontractor that you are giving, work from your company, or outsourcing work from a company, SOC 2 is a report that you would be asking from that. And that's where, like at this time, I think we must be working on at least 26, 28 odd assignments on just SOC 2 and a few on SOC 1 also. And most of it are on the SME segment, small to medium scale enterprises having anywhere from 50 people to 500 people. Even 1,000 are there, but that's not very many, but most of it is on the just on the SME segment that we have. And what typically happens is that with regards to SOC 2 and SOC 3, that is, with regards to SOC 1 and SOC 2, we are doing pretty good on that. And SOC 2 is basically what you would like to see on the subcontractor side, to see how they're delivering on the processing and delivery of the SLAs that they have signed with you. So that is where most of the clients that we have it is from the client side. That is, the client has said, please please come up and show us your SOC 2 reports, the compliance reports, to ensure that, to show us or give us assurance that you are able to deliver on whatever you have committed to us. Okay, so SOC 1, it is coming under SSA 18 now, that we have. Okay, give me a second, please. Okay, so this is coming under, as we said earlier, it is coming under ICFR. It is basically on the systems and controls and the service organization from the internal controls for financial reporting. So how financially stable your company is, how well you are delivering, how in depth you're going to ensure that the client deliverables are maintained. So that's where SOC 1 comes into place. SOC 1 has its place, but the requirements from your client perspective won't be that high. A few to ask, but basically is SOC 2. So who's covered under SOC 1? Basically, it'll be all the payroll processing, healthcare professionals, custodians for investment companies, financial services, healthcare, payroll, payment processing, ASPs. So that's where SOC 1 comes into place. SOC 2, this is what we are meeting today for. So this is where all the companies who are outsourcing work, outsourcing any sort of the process, even for data center purposes, that's where SOC 2 comes into place. And there are these 5 trust services criterion: security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. Now they have to be, remember one thing, they have to be done by a licensed CPA who's empaneled and accredited with the AICPA. So it cannot just be done by your chartered accountant. So we have seen that also ridiculous thing happening. A chartered accountant, a local chartered accountant cannot be doing this thing. It is not admissible. It has to be done by a CPA who is accredited and registered with the AICPA. There is no two ways about it. It's not my opinion. That's how it is. So there are these 5 trust criteria. Now, if you're looking at getting it done in a very short duration, like 90 days, typically, as a company, we look into not just auditing or doing a gap assessment. We've got many of our clients who are also doing, for whom we are also doing like an end-to-end consulting, where the consulting team of ours, which is separate from the audit team, even helps companies get ready for SOC 2 engagements. So depending on your size and scope, the timelines would vary. Now, anywhere we have done assignments on SOC 2 which finish in 2 months, 3 months, and there are some assignments that is spent for more than a year. So the reason for our webinar today is to discuss as to how things can get expedited. And one of the core things is how many trust principles are applicable. That's one of the first things that you need to get out of the way or get clarified. Now, this thing you'll typically get from a few areas. One is what your management has to say, and where is your company heading, how you position yourself. The next thing is your clients. Ask them basically what are trust principles they want you to get attested on. And if that you think would be slightly embarrassing, which it is, what you can do is just look at your commitments that you have been making to your clients. That is, you are saying that you'll be having 99.9% uptime, or you'll be maintaining this paperwork, or you'll be doing MIS reporting in some X amount of time in an X amount of way, or whatever be the case. So based on that, based on your client commitments, you can select your trust principles. And if you have any queries, you can always drop me a line, and I'll be more than happy to do that. Okay, there's a nice query from Shrikant. Shrikant is asking, what is the difference between SOC 2 and ISO 27001? Okay, that's a good question, Shrikant. Basically, for 27001 and ISO, the overlap is very less. ISO has got like 114 odd requirements, and SOC 2 has like more than 400. Now, beyond the number of controls, it's also the range and scale and scope of the standard. And there is, interestingly, there is a webinar that we've done on SOC 2 and ISO. It is there on a YouTube channel. I don't have it readily, otherwise I would have pasted the link, but I'll be pasting it towards the end, and you can look it up, or you can just do a search on YouTube for VISTA InfoSec official, and the channel is there. And we've got a webinar just on SOC 2 and ISO 27001. There are overlaps, but it's not too much. I would say if you have implemented it very well, then maybe you got an overlap of say 20%, not more than that. Okay, Jamie, I'm sorry, there's a nice question. Would the presentation be shared with all the participants later? Yes. Since you have registered, you'll be getting a link to it after the webinar, but you have to stick around, all right? So, okay, going ahead. So thank you for your questions on that. So who's covered basically on SOC 2? So look at this range and scale, all the cloud-based providers, whether it is software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, the companies who are providing HR services, security services, email collaboration, cloud ERP services, data center co-location. Just think about it that way. So let's assume I'm an SME or an enterprise level organization based in India, and I've got based in Singapore or Vietnam or wherever, and I'm taking a lot of work from my clients based in the US. So, and my data centers are, my servers are hosted in a local, data center. So in that case, your client in the US would be expecting you to have SOC 2 in place. And you, when you're going ahead with SOC 2, do ensure that all your service providers, like you can see the list on the screen right now, are also SOC 2 attested. I cannot use the word certified because there is nothing called as SOC 2 certification. So any servers, so any sort of your service providers should also be SOC 2 compliant, and their service providers down the chain have to be SOC 2 compliant. So they're also, you can cut down on your scope, and you can cut down on your timelines by identifying and ensuring that your service providers are SOC 2 compliant from the get-go, or get them going. So that should help you. All right. Okay, another query. Who can, oh, that's a nice name. Jesus Bayari, nice name. All right, he's asking who can perform the audit or attestation. Okay, see, as I said earlier, the attestation has to be done by a CPA, certified public accountant, who's empaneled and attested and onboarded with the AICPA Council based in the US. It cannot be done by a local chartered accountant. Do remember that. The person has to be empaneled. You need to check the attestation on the AICPA website. Okay, so, another question. If a customer asks for Mr. Sheshadri, if a customer asks for SOC 2, can I go ahead and say that I'm ISO 27001 and will be on a similar? And no, I said earlier, no, that the overlap is very less. It's hardly 15-20%, and no person in his right frame of mind will accept your 27001 in lieu of SOC 2, because as I said, SOC 2 is massive. I would really suggest you to download the standard, or you can write me a mail. I can send you the list of requirements on the SOC 2. You can yourself, check against ISO 27001 and see the overlap is very, superficial at best. And there are many areas, especially privacy, especially you can say processing integrity, which is not at all, if I can say that, in a practical manner covered under ISO 27001. So that can, being ISO 27001 can be a good start for going for SOC 2, but it's still a long way to go. I hope that answers the question. What do you need now? Being an SME, why would you need now? There are regulatory requirements. There could be user entity mandates that a client has forced it on you. There are vendor management programs. There is due diligence. Again, if you are taking work, outsourced work, your client base is in the US. Very few would agree to work with you if you're not SOC 2 compliant. If you're a service provider to them, very few would agree to work with you if you're not SOC 2 compliant. And you need an independent third party opinion. That's where I said it is required to have a CPA based audit done. And last but not the least, if you intend now there are so many clients of ours who are asking for SOC 2 because they need to participate in a RFP. So even to be competitively relevant in the business, in the marketplace, you need to have SOC 2 in place. Okay, I'm getting a lot of queries for the timelines and stuff. We'll be doing that towards the end. Now there is another, Mr. Chandran is asking, is there any specific certification for the SOC 1 and SOC 2? There is no certification for SOC 1 and SOC 2. It simply you need to get compliance audited by a CPA. And again, actually, I cannot get into too much on the basics. Otherwise, I'll never be able to complete the agenda of this webinar today. I would really request you to visit our YouTube channel. There is an entire playlist on SOC 2, and there are many videos that we have put up with regards to the basics on SOC 2. Again, no offense to anyone, your questions, I love them, and I will be responding to them as time goes by, or I'll respond to you by email on that. There's a SOC 3. Now, SOC 3, if I can use those words, SOC 3 is more like an executive summary of a SOC 2 report. There is, that's about it. Now, for a SOC 2 now, so why would you want a SOC 3 report? Now, a SOC 2 report is basically contains a huge amount of confidential information about the company. And you cannot just circulate a SOC 2 report to every Tom, Dick, and Harry or any new client that comes up or attach it in a RFP. Of course, it's your choice, but you wouldn't really do that, because you're putting out a lot of confidential information about your company outside, and that can potentially get misused. So that's where a SOC 3 comes into place. Now, a SOC 3 would be like an executive summary which says that what all control requirements in SOC 2 is applicable to you, and whether they have been closed or not, and stuff like that, without getting into the specifics of how they have been closed out. So the evidence requirements, what evidence was checked, and all those things would be missed out, would be kept out from a SOC 3 report. So that makes like like a public use. A SOC 3 becomes like a public use SOC 2 report. So I hope that makes sense. So in summary, this is how it looks like for a SOC 1, SOC 2, and a SOC 3 report. So if you have any queries, I would love to take you up on that. Okay, there is. Okay, there are many queries. Is this attestation valid only in the West, that is in the US region? See, as I said earlier, this is like more where an X company who's based in the US would want their subcontractors or their service providers to get SOC 2 compliant regardless of where they are. So the attestation is, all your clients based in the West would be asking you for it. But I cannot envisage a scenario where a company based, say, in the Middle East or maybe in Africa, all the business interests in Africa would want to get, certified or compliant on SOC 2, because it simply wouldn't make sense. Of course, from a good practices or best practices perspective, perhaps, but the attestation, as I said, is acceptable only in the US. So again, another question: are organizations in the Middle East required to do SOC 2 compliance? Well, yes, if your clients are based in the US, your clients in the US would ask you for it. If not today, if not tomorrow, and if you are intending to expand in the US, you will need to get SOC 2 compliant. Okay, So going ahead, okay, that's it. These are the trust principles that we are looking at now. Let us quickly just breeze through it before you jump into it. So once you're looking at getting certified in a good amount of time, one of the key challenges that you have faced everywhere, or we have seen where we have gone for an audit and companies, like for many companies, we are just doing the gap assessment and doing the audit, and they have got their own service providers. The floundering that I see is very appalling. That I've always seen, that I've seen when you're doing a work review and why the project is getting stretched. And so typically the scoping is never done properly, rather very rarely done. That is infrastructure, what software, what people, what processes in scope, what data is there in scope, all those things. So defining the system, if you are looking at getting this thing done in the shortest period of time possible, you need to define the systems first. Okay. Okay, there is another question that is there. Can SOC 2 attestation for any other regulation or standard audit, such as PCI, GDPR? Yes, there is a lot of overlap between PCI, GDPR, and HIPAA and stuff. Again, we have got a few videos on that on our YouTube channel. I cannot really get into this at this time, but I really encourage you to go through it. But there are overlaps, but you can't say because I'm GDPR compliant, therefore I am SOC 2 compliant. You can't do that. Because I'm PCI DSS compliant, therefore my SOC 2 is done. You can't say that. But you can, for example, there's a huge overlap between GDPR and the privacy trust principle of SOC 2. So in that case, that one requirement or one trust principle, trust services criterion is taken care of, but the rest are still open. So you have to get that done. And remember one thing, like out of 5 trust criterion, as we saw earlier, that is security, processing integrity, availability, confidentiality, and privacy. Security is mandatory. You have to do it. It is always security plus availability and confidentiality or privacy or processing integrity. But you cannot just say I'll just do privacy trust principle and leave out the other 4. You can't do that. Security is mandatory. That's a base minimum requirement. I hope that makes sense. Now, when I use the word security is mandatory, I didn't mean it from just like a figure of speech or a word. I meant the security trust criterion of SOC 2. So I hope that makes sense. So this is where it is, the 5 attributes of a system known as trust services principle or trust services criterion. This is the first one that I said, the security trust services criterion, which is mandatory. The other 4 are optional. Now when I say optional, you have to get this thing validated from your auditor and your clients and your, of course, your business and what you are projecting in for the next 1, 3, 5 years to know where you're going, based on which you select the trust principles. Okay. I'm just getting too many questions, and I'm sorry. I'll just finish like 80% of my webinar, and please do keep popping in your queries. I will try and complete it towards the end. But now I'm not even halfway through my webinar, so please help me complete this, and then towards the end I'll take up more questions. Now there are these 4 components that has to be looked into: policies, communication, procedures, and of course the monitoring part. So all these other areas, whether there is a policies and procedures, whether all the communications is there with all the responsible parties and authorized users. For example, I'll tell you, which is not there in other standards, very highlighted, that is how you're doing your client service management. So how you are giving your how you are ensuring and communicating to your client that the SLAs are adhered to. How are you doing problem management? How you are escalating issues to the client in case there is a breach? All those things are covered very acutely and very strongly in SOC 2. So it is much beyond the other standards that we have seen, including how are you doing your whistleblowers, how much is your management involved in the functioning of InfoSec and IT. All those things gets covered in SOC 2. And there are other the procedures which are there, the documentation, the records, and of course the day-to-day monitoring of the requirement of SOC 2 is also very, very important. Now if I might turn it the other way around, okay, Ray, that's a nice name. He's asking, what if you are doing SOC 2 and you are looking at ISO 27001 compliance? I would say it's a walk in the park. You can just simply go for certification as soon as you have drawn up a statement of applicability, you're good to go. So it is that much. So SOC 2 subsumes, if I can say that, ISO 27001, but it's not the other way around. Okay, Mr. Panchal has asked for the biggest obstacles faced as so far at technical and process level. I'm trying to do that at this time, Panchal, to share as much experience as possible. And I'll continue to do so. I'll build up more as the webinar is going ahead. And coming to the first security principle, this is for the protection of the system from unauthorized and physical access, limiting access to the system, permitting authorized access based on relevant needs, and preventing unauthorized systems. Now understand, for all the other four trust principles, there are some mandatory requirements. So, for example, if I look at availability as a trust principle, it doesn't mean that the security principle doesn't have any controls of availability. It does. So the the base minimum availability requirements are there in the security principle. Now the availability trust principle adds more to it. So there are optional availability controls in the availability trust principle. Same way for confidentiality or processing integrity or privacy, there are mandatory sacrosanct controls which are included in the security principle, and there are add-on controls or optional or additional controls, if I might say that, in the other trust principles. So if you're, in case you're wondering, if there are security, if the confidentiality and availability is covered separately, what exactly is there in the security principle? The security principle contains some mandatory requirements. The availability is like of the CIA, the A part. Over here again, it is accessibility of the system. It does not address system functionality. It does from the processing integrity point of view. And here the key is identifying and preventing potential threats to the system availability. So it is not just having, I have a DR in place, that's enough. No, that's not enough. In the availability principle, even how you are going to identify preventing a downtime, correcting a downtime, detecting a downtime. So the corrective, detective, and corrective controls are there. Plus, from the administrative perspective, logical perspective, technical perspective. So all these 6 sides have to be covered when you're talking about any of those trust principles. The processing integrity, again, this trust principles basically we've seen with regards to any sort of companies who are doing any sort of data processing or doing any sort of MIS development and stuff. The completeness, validity, accuracy, timeliness, and authorization of the data. Now again, in this thing, the key issues that we have seen at the time of audit, which further then stretches out the audit period, is that the system documentation is missing. The system documentation is missing. Secondly is that SOC 2 speaks very strongly as to how do you ensure that the input and the outputs are matched appropriately based on the processing strength of the particular process that you have in place, or how it is mapping to the SLAs that you have in place. So all the cross mapping is very, very important, which is missed out many a time, as you've seen in our audits. Confidentiality, again, I don't think I need to preach to the choir over here, but again, it is the bottom line is information designated as confidential is protected as committed or agreed. So again, the bottom line becomes what your how you're projecting your company, what your website says about you, what your SLAs and agreement says about you. So all those things get paired into the confidentiality trust services criterion, because what is considered confidentiality can vary very significantly. Now let me ask you a quick question. How do you identify what is confidential in an organization and what is not? You can just chat me, or you can just pop me your response. Let me see how what would be your response to that. How would you identify? Say, look at the second last point. What is considered? This is what we are seen as one of the areas in the confidentiality clause when you're auditing it as an issue. So how do you identify what are what is the confidential information, and the non-confidential, what is the process followed for identifying confidential and non-confidential information in an organization. So what would be your response to that? Come on, drop me query on that. Okay, quite a few answers popping up on my screen. And okay, there is, somebody has written policies and procedures. Okay. Couple of them have got the answer right. It's based on a risk assessment. Asset identification, classification, and a thorough risk assessment is required to identify what is confidential in your organization. And that's where we have seen many companies fail this particular trust criterion. That is, they've not done a proper risk assessment in the organization. Risk assessment is required as a part of SOC 2 also. It's not an option. That's why I said earlier that if you've done a very good SOC 2 assessment and compliant to it, so SOC ISO 27001 becomes a walk in the park for you. The privacy principle, again, this is as per generally accepted privacy principles issued by the AICPA and the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants. Now, again, it's the rights and obligations of individuals. It is it's very close to what you see in GDPR. And we've got a webinar online on our YouTube page for SOC 2 and GDPR. Do go through it. And this is basically focused on the criterion that of individual rights to privacy, identifying, letting them know the rights, ensuring that the data which is for what you say it's being collected, it's being used for that very purpose and not for anything else. So that is where the privacy principle comes into place. So as we have seen earlier, even in GDPR, there is a notice to the users about the privacy policies, procedures, what purpose it's used for, their choice and consent. How have you got the choice? Inform the user about their choice and taken appropriate consent, collecting it in the right way. Then the use, the retention, disposal. So it is very, very similar to GDPR. So the last trust principle is very similar to GDPR, as you see. Thank you again for all your points that you're putting in, and I will cover it towards the end of my webinar as I go through. And as I said earlier, the points to ponder over here for the privacy principle, whether it is GDPR, HIPAA, there is PDPA, PDPB, which is more, as we get to see in the Southeast Asia, whereas like Indonesia or Malaysia or Vietnam and stuff, where they have a PDPA, PDPB, and of course the CPPA. We might do a webinar on that. That is Californian Privacy Protection Act. So there are all these requirements are there, and there is a huge overlap. Now, if you're talking about a point-to-point overlap, or very good overlap, I would say it would be GDPR, in case you are looking at my opinion on that. So in case you have already GDPR in place, your one trust principle is fairly well covered. So before we get into the timelines, look into that part also, and then the first things first. When you're looking at a very optimal prioritized approach to SOC 2, first things first, which is, as I've been harping about from the beginning of this webinar, your contracts, RFPs, and your SLAs that you have committed to your clients, that is there in place with your clients. Go to the AICPA website, look up if there is any new developments, any new addendum, any new sort of add-ons or new clarifications that might have been issued. That is there. What sort of training and awareness is there in your organization? How serious is the organization about doing SOC 2? Executive communication, the bottom line, that is, it has to start from the top down. In a few companies you have seen, this is taken more like a marketing initiative. It will never fly. Even if you take it as just like a IT initiative, because many of the controls are in IT, it will never fly. It has to come from the top-down approach, because it will impact almost all the departments in the company. And last but not the least, discuss with your service auditor. So before you even start off on your journey of SOC 2, appoint an auditor. You will need the perspective. Coming to the scoping part, since I've spoken so much about it and there are so many inquiries that people have already put on the scoping part, identify your in-scope services. Again, this is where you can probably ask your CPA or your auditor to do a pre-assessment for you. That will really help you, because then the auditor can be in a position to even help you scope it out. Or maybe you might think about taking some sort of advisory approach from your CPA. That is something that we also offer to our clients. Select the physical locations. Again, I've used the word select, but I'm not very happy about it. See, the reason is that it's not really your full choice. Maybe there's a process X wherein you are, maybe working on your client data, providing the information back to the clients for, after massaging the data out and getting some proper MIs out. And maybe your process is spanning across 2 locations, and the data is flowing to those 2 locations, and those 2 locations combined deliver on a particular process. As a part of your initiative on SOC 2, you can't say that I will include location A in scope but not location B in scope. That won't be acceptable. It's really not acceptable. Next is the sub-service organization. That is, as I said earlier, which of your partners, which of your down in line service providers are required to get SOC 2 compliant. This should not spring up as a surprise to you at the time of audit. Do a very strong risk assessment, document your processes, identify your control activities, and last but not the least is identify the timeline. All this comes from a very strong risk assessment or a gap assessment, and before that, first thing is scoping. Identify that the scope is proper, what you're going to, where you're going to do, what all trust principles, how many people are involved, what all processes would be involved, all those things. And if you're doing this for the first time, I would really suggest you to take the help of someone who knows what SOC 2 is all about. It's not really your choice in all ways. And if it's a good auditor, like how we do, we would not be cutting any corners with you. So going ahead, audit form selection, again, since there are a few queries on that, as I said earlier, it has to be a licensed CPA firm, and the person who is doing the audit has to be a licensed CPA. There should be independence. So by independence meaning you cannot just audit and attest your own organization, or if you are serving on the board of that organization, you cannot be, and you are also a licensed CPA firm, or you are a licensed CPA and you're also on the board of that organization, you cannot certify that organization. Or if you're doing any sort of management task in that organization, you cannot be certifying that organization. Go for a single vendor approach. Don't be jumping CPAs because you're simply not happy. You need to, if the CPA is not good enough, but ensure that you're sticking as much as possible, because maybe a particular CPA has not allowed some concessions to you, and you think about going to some other CPA, that other CPA might not allow that also. So ensure that you're working with the single vendor approach, and there's an audit team. What sort of an audit team the CPA is bringing on field? Do they have the right technical expertise? Because understand, this is a technical standard. Your CPA, now this is something which I'm relating based on my experience. You've seen CPAs are very good on finance, were very good on process control for internal process development and stuff like that, but they have zero skills with regards to IT and absolutely no understanding on InfoSec. So technically you can still work with that person, because that person belongs to a licensed CPA and is a CPA himself. But if you're looking at getting anything out of this assignment as a method of helping your organization grow and improve, it will never work. I would really suggest you to check the credentials of the CPA. What is the technical background? What is the InfoSec background? Otherwise, they'll not even be in a position to answer your queries as to what does this particular control mean? What is this particular requirement for doing an assessment or doing a VA or doing a PT or whatever be the case? What should be the scope of that? All those things might not be, the person will never be able to answer. I personally know CPAs Good people, again, I've got nothing against CPAs. Good people, but absolutely no, brilliant as far as finance and economics and taxation and all is concerned, but absolutely no background in infosec and IT. Again, I'm not saying that a accounting and a finance person should be strong in IT and infosec. I'm saying that the standard is for IT and infosec. So ensure that the person you're identifying as an auditor has the right background. I would say at one time that if there is you have a CPA who is very good in IT and infosec, but no background with regards to finance and accounts and taxation, I would suggest you to go ahead with that person rather than the other way around. Points to factor in at the time of audit. How long does it take? That's one of the frequently asked questions. So typically there is a type 1 report and there is a type 2 report. Now, okay, I cannot get in the details of that. I would really suggest you to look up my webinar on YouTube, which is called SOC2 and You. I'll put that in the description of this YouTube video once you put it up on YouTube, that is. But if you can go to a YouTube channel and there is a SOC2 and You can go through that. It covers a lot of basics. But type 1 is like test design of your documentation, but it would really ask you for evidence of implementation. Type 2 report asks for a minimum 6 months to 12 months evidence of implementation. So just the audit report, just the audit will take at least 4 to 6 weeks minimum, and then the reporting takes place. So as a company, from our side, where we do SOC 2, once the audit is over, the report writing takes minimum 4 weeks. So we sometimes issue a provisional audit certificate that states that you have cleared the SOC 2 assignment, SOC 2 assessment, and there are no high risk findings. That is assuming that there are no high risk findings, and then give it a certificate, so like a compliance certificate, so then you can give that to your clients while you're waiting for the report to be released. So these are the timelines. So if you're looking at completing the entire thing in maybe 3 months time, that is 90 days, like half of it will go in the audit part. So factor that in also. The cost for certification, again, depends on many factors. So many a time we've got clients to call in and say, how much time does it take? How much would it cost to get SOC 2 certified? So we ask them for the scope, and many a time they say that, okay, we've got this XYZ CPA who's charging us so and so, and they never asked these questions. So my answer to you would be, I don't know on what basis anybody came to a amount for the audit, because it all depends on scope, number of employees, number of locations, number of trust principle, whether it's a type 1, type 2, period covered, all those things, how many controls are there in scope, what is your background maturity, all those things goes in the arriving at a cost for doing the certification for you. Now understand, the first time the cost would be slightly higher, but the next time around you can expect a lowering in price because you're already SOC 2 compliant, and you can assume that, okay, that you'll be doing at least something right for the next time. As I said, the type 1 reports is like a snapshot in time, looks at the suitability of the design of controls, doesn't look at the background evidence. So type 2 is type 1 plus evidence for 6 to 12 months. So many startups come to us for SOC 2. So we typically tell them, you can do a type 1 now because you don't really, or even your company has not been in existence for 6 months or so, and you don't have the evidence. So do a type 1, and maybe after 6-8 months of implementing, you can do a type 2. It's not going to be phenomenally expensive. But remember one thing, that is clients would typically be looking at a SOC 2 type 2 report. So as much as possible, even though it hurts the revenues, we tell companies to not waste a lot of time and money doing a type 1, but go ahead for a type 2 report. So I hope that makes sense. So this is how it is, the report structure, how it looks like. We've already done this in detail earlier, so but I still hope it makes sense to you. All contains auditor's opinion, management assertion, description of controls, criterion, all those things. SOC 3, as I said, what are the control activities, test for operating effectiveness, test of results, all those things, and its results of test, all those things are not covered in a SOC 3. SOC 1 and SOC 2, yes, it would be. The report structure, again, it's an auditor's opinion. There will be management's assertion where there's a sign off from the board as to what the organization is all about, how it works, what is happening, what processes, all those things are there in place. And any sort of, then comes a description, then the test of controls and the corresponding results are there, are documented in the report. That's where it takes a lot of time. It runs into a few hundred pages, a SOC2 report, and drafting it takes a lot of time and patience. And again, what's in them, a SOC 1 type 1 report, again, suitability and design of controls, and again, type 2 controls is suitability and design of controls plus a test of effectiveness for at least 6 to 12 months of evidence. Now, this is the core of the webinar. So we've stuck in so long. I'm juicing it up in this last slide that is there. The first thing, if you're looking at a prioritized approach, get the scope in place proper. Involve your auditor. That is extremely important for you. Get management buy-in on the scope. Like for many companies, we simply say that forget the final attestation. Since you're doing this for the first time, just do an initial gap assessment with scoping. Show that to your management, show the repercussions, show the implications, show the budgets for a full-fledged implementation, and then go for a final compliance attestation. So this will really get many things out of place, out of the way for you. Now do a project plan with the end in mind. So do a reverse calculation from the date. So if you're looking at getting certified by in the next 3 months, do a reverse approach. Okay, so then the audit takes like a month, or you might say that let me just get ready in 3 months time. So then the audit is shifted in the 4th month. So in that case, how much time are you the internal effectiveness will take, risk assessment will take, gap assessment will take, documentation will take, and then finally doing a pre-audit and the training. So do a reverse calculation, do a project plan with the target date in mind. I've said this like a dozen times now. Do an initial gap assessment. Very important for you. This will really set the tone of what you're going towards. Have a weekly review call. Without this, it is doomed to failure. Have weekly review calls. We're looking at getting this done in 3 months time, 90 days. Identify and train the team members. Now, from the scale of the queries that you have seen, there are so many misconceptions in the team, even in IT, even in management. Ask your CPA to do the training for you within the organization as to what is SOC 2 all about, how it works, and what are the control areas, what has been the gaps, and what are the expectations from the team, where can the senior management pitch in, all those things. Do a very effective training program and take support from your auditor from day one. No unpleasant surprises. Understand this is a very an audit is always subjective by nature. No matter how much twinge you can give towards objectivity, but it will always be subjective by nature, depending on various circumstances. Based on the mentality, based on the background of the auditor, what evidence is shown, not shown, including if I might say that, what the auditor's wife fed him when he came, before he came for the audit. So how foul his mood is. So it depends even on that to some extent. So, but take support from your auditor from day one, so there are no unpleasant surprises for you. Start collecting evidences and review it on a time basis. Don't wait for the evidence collection towards the end. And whatever you have done, just tick it off and say, okay, these 400 controls I finished, 100, 300 more to go, which are the most urgent and what is the most important, how much will take more time, how much will take next time. All those things are there. So start collecting the evidences. Okay, so that brings me to the end. I've shot over the time, but thank you so much. Each and every one I can say has been there with me through the entire webinar. Thank you so much for this. So these are the past webinars that has happened so far. I was talking about this 13th webinar, that is SOC 2 and you, that you can go through. Yeah, and of course drop in through our queries. Thank you so much for this. And towards the end of the webinar, you can see there's a brief survey towards the end of this webinar. Please, we put in a lot of time and money in this webinar. Do ensure that you fill up that webinar feedback sheet. Give us some feedback. It could be critical feedback. It could be some good words, some appreciation. Anything would be there. Even some critical feedback or requests for future webinars, put all that in, and I personally assure you that I'll be going and responding to each one. That's our YouTube channel. I'm putting it up again. So do go through our YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to it as you're there. That's a Facebook page. We keep on posting a lot of tidbits of content. That's a LinkedIn page, which is there. And of course, these are my coordinates to drop me a line. And we always do respond back to you on whatever that there is. So thank you so much for being such a great audience. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I think we might be doing something good on GDPR coming up, or something on PCI DSS. But again, it depends on what you have to say about this. So do drop in your feedback with regards to your feedback on what could be on your horizon as should be the next webinar. So thank you again, and have a great evening ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.